What's going on, folks? This is Undead FOIA, and this is what we call FOIA Around and Find Out. It's a little show we put together to kind of take a look at some different issues related to Russiagate and some of the narratives that have been put out there, primarily through the use of FOIA, but also trying to look at declassified documents and really trying to make an earnest and honest effort to analyze the documents that have been put out there. And I'm joined by MB, my co-host. How you doing tonight, MB?
Real good, Undead. How you doing? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Yeah, we always talk about trying to keep this to like half an hour. And tonight we're really going to try to do that. Keep it a little bit shorter, let MB go out. Enjoy his Friday night.
We're going to keep it tight this time. I swear to God.
Absolutely. So tonight, we wanted to talk a little bit more about Project Birmingham and Hamilton-68 and a few tie-ins that we don't necessarily feel like have been hit as hard as they could have been. So obviously we're in a really interesting situation, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can figure out how. Here we go. All right. So here on the screen, we have one of the latest write-ups from Matt Taibbi, who's been doing a fantastic job breaking down the whole story from Hamilton-68 and this whole narrative that was out there in the public. It's been pushed out there for a number of years, and essentially these operatives created this dashboard, Hamilton-68, and then they just kind of made up different reasons why they thought Russians were interfering with our elections. They just came up with a list of accounts, and they kept that closely held so that they wouldn't have to actually explain what they actually did as far as how they had determined these accounts were supposedly Russians. And there's been a lot of discussion on the Hamilton-68 portions of this. There's been a lot of Spaces chats. Matt's done a fantastic job, but I actually want to move to this paragraph a little bit more. And Matt knows the story. I know Matt knows all about this, and I believe he's probably going to get into this over the next couple of weeks. But he touches on what we want to focus on tonight in this paragraph. So as Matt says here, by early 2018, all of a sudden Clint Watts was starting to walk this back a little bit, where when he was sitting in front of the Senate in March 2017 in congressional testimony, he was sort of, he didn't necessarily go into the bots a great deal, but he definitely said there was an influence campaign that Russia was orchestrating. I don't remember there being all that much testimony on the actual bots themselves. And then if you were to kind of look at this in a greater picture, there was an indictment filed against the Internet Research Agency a few years ago that's since been dismissed. But if you go through that indictment, there is no mention of Russian bots. What they really outline is there's a handful of accounts that became popular. They had a lot of followers, and that was supposedly this influence campaign. And then I think the indictment touched on a few $1,000s worth of ads that had been purchased. So we're not looking at a big sweeping influence campaign anymore. Maybe some of that there's some validity. Maybe there's a few accounts that are Russian in nature that were sharing memes. Most of them not really related to Hillary Clinton or the 2016 election at all. And yet this whole narrative had started being pushed out there. And we're going to revisit a few stories in a minute here, because what Taibbi touches on here, I think, is a part of a much bigger story, and a much bigger story that hasn't really gotten the coverage that I feel it should. So as he alludes to, Jonathan Morgan of the cybersecurity firm New Knowledge was outed for faking a Russian influence campaign in the Alabama Senate race. He used Hamilton-like tactics to create online chatter about Republican Roy Moore having Russian bot support. Got caught and suffered the indignity of having what he called a small experiment described as a false flag operation in this New York Times. So the event in question, apparently Roy Moore had about 20,000 followers on Twitter, and then over a single weekend, that doubled. He gained 20,000 followers, and of these 20,000 accounts, they were primarily Russian-based, and they were, tweeting in Russian language, and for various reasons, they were obviously Russian. And so narratives were being pushed out there saying, oh, the Russians support Roy Moore, and therefore, he's you don't want to vote for the guy that the Russians favor. That was the narrative that was being pushed in 2017. But as that sort of started unfolding a year later in 2018, you have articles from the New York Times, you have articles from this is the Washington Post, and this is obviously early 2019, describing the same situation, which there was a false flag operation conducted by operatives from a company called New Knowledge. And we're going to touch on that a little bit more. But New Knowledge was funded by TDIP, which is Daniel Jones' entity. And effectively, it's all being funded by operatives connected to Fusion GPS and the Democrat establishment. So it's very, very alarming because some of these same researchers, this Jonathan Morgan, New Knowledge type folks, had actually authored a report that they had submitted to the Senate on supposed Russian interference efforts during the 2016 election. So here are the two reports, and these are sort of important. We should probably do a longer video at some point, but these are supposedly on the Internet Research Agency interfering with our election. And as it turns out, some of this is either overblown, or it's just false, or it's actually going to be related to operations that Democrat operatives had fabricated. So there's two reports. One is specifically from New Knowledge, and this focuses on the Internet Research Agency. And all of a sudden, you have an organization that's doing this report on the IRA, and then the same organization months later is actually being implicated in doing the same thing and creating false, fabricated Russian Twitter accounts. And what we just referenced a moment ago with Roy Moore, the candidate of the 2017 special election for the Senate in Alabama, that's where this ties in. The same people that wrote the report actually went and spoofed and created those accounts. So here's the first report, and I just want to call out the second report a little bit, because the second report, which kind of deals in the same realm, it's not done by New Knowledge up here, but the information was provided by the Senate for their analysis. And I don't think we're out of bounds to speculate that the Senate provided information collected by Hamilton-68 and New Knowledge and to this group that went and analyzed it. And lo and behold, their analysis, of course, supported the narratives that were out there. And you can see all these references. Well, these are all the narratives that were being pushed out there. These are all the different stories talking about, Russian interference and influence campaigns and, the fake Russian accounts. So that's the gist of it. That's where we wanted to start. And I'm going to get a chance to have MB jump in and kind of share his thoughts while I collect mine, and then we'll proceed from here. So what do you, anything you want to add, MB?
Yeah, just some context that this isn't a theory that there was a false flag operation, this might have happened. This is something that absolutely happened. It's well documented, and not just by right-wing outlets, but absolutely. I was just looking at an NPR article. Operation Birmingham is well documented. It definitely happened. So either these guys were researching what the Russians were doing and thought it was such a good idea that they decided we'll do it ourselves, or they were full of crap all along. So it's one or the other, because they used these techniques shortly after. And this was, as people remember, a big Senate campaign. It was Jeff Sessions' seat, and he was appointed Attorney General, which was probably one of the biggest mistakes President Trump ever made. And the fallout that was a special election for that Senate seat. So it was sort of like the Georgia thing. It was a big deal. It was, everybody's eyes were on that, and Moore was sort of a damaged candidate. And even in the such a red state, the Democrats managed to by throwing all this garbage, create a situation where a Senate seat that should have been Republican is vulnerable. And this wasn't some minor thing. This was a big deal that major resources were thrown at. So I don't think there's any question that this is something we really need to pay attention to, because it's all out in the open. This is nothing. This isn't speculation. This is, anybody can look it up for themselves and see exactly what happened.
Well, that's exactly right, and I appreciate you jumping in with that, because These stories have been out there obviously for 5 years now, but we never got the larger context. So all this, these same people are working with Hamilton-68. Clint Watts, New Knowledge. It's the same people that are setting up the Hamilton-68 dashboard effectively. So, it looks like the constructs of a very concerted effort to carry this narrative out there. And one point I wanted to make as far as this Project Birmingham goes, this is described as kind of a false flag operation directed at Alabama. That has changed a little bit because that's not what I think this is anymore. Now, yeah, they wanted the Alabama Senate seat, and I'm sure there's some benefit there. But to put this into the context that we've gotten from Matt Taibbi over the last few weeks, they were going to Twitter in late 2017, and they were saying, "Oh, you got Russian Twitter bots, you got Russian Twitter bots," and then Twitter's like, "No, we don't have any Russian Twitter bots." And at the same time that Twitter was saying, "No, we don't have this issue," this group, this New Knowledge group, and the associated researchers of Project Birmingham, they went and they created, thousands and thousands of Russian Twitter bots. And then all of a sudden, they could go to the Senate and they said, "Hey, there are Russian Twitter bots. Look at all these Twitter bots that we're finding now." And I think some of the reporting that are out there, and there is a story from CNN in early January, I think it's January 2018, which he might be alluding to here, where Twitter goes back and they say they find 50,000 Russian Twitter bots and then they go and ban them. But there's a disconnect in the reporting right now because, as Matt Taibbi said, has been shown us, in the fall of 2017, they're not finding anything. There's really nothing they're pointing to that has any substance. They're actually calling out accounts that are definitely not Russian. They're not bots at all. And then all of a sudden, these guys go and they create 20, maybe 50,000 accounts, and then all of a sudden, Twitter has something to find, and they find these accounts and they ban them. And this feeds this massive narrative that's out there, right? That Russia has interfered in our campaign, in our election, and then you saw a flood of stories getting pushed out there about just how many retweets and likes and everything that these accounts supposedly had, and all this different news that was being pushed during the 2016 election. So, anything else, MB?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's a really good point, that this was sort of not just about the one campaign or to smear more. It was more to create this sensation that the Russian Twitter bots were everywhere, and therefore they needed to continue censoring social media. They needed to continue investigating Russian interference and tying it to the Trump presidency at that point. And that's obviously was just keeping this fire lit. And if you look at the Hamilton-68, it was part of the Alliance for Securing Democracy. And if you look at that board of directors, it was just all Democrats, Hillary people, and anti-Trumpers. I mean, if you look at the board, it's Bill Kristol and Jake Sullivan and Chertoff and John Podesta. These are the people that were all over the Russiagate stuff, same names. So not only are they in the media conducting interviews and leading the drive against for Russiagate, they're also part of this, I don't know if it's a cabal or what you would call it, that is working to censor as though they are this neutral arbiter that is just discovering, that is just studying social media and discovering these things. So clearly we're not. They were partisan actors it was all part of a bigger, if you call it conspiracy, but at least it was a movement to push the Russia narrative in many different ways, including right up into censoring social media that goes on to this day.
Well, I think I'm ready to go there. I think I would call this a conspiracy, and I think this is one portion of a larger and very concerted and purposeful effort to create this narrative. And I think it should absolutely be called a conspiracy. And one name I want to throw out there is Mikey Dickerson. So Mikey Dickerson is associated with this Project Birmingham that was out there, but in the larger context, during this 2018 period, Mikey Dickerson was actually associated with the Daniel Jones investigation into Alpha Bank allegations. A lot of people don't know that, but that's something that came out during certain depositions of the Alpha Bank civil case. So Mikey Dickerson was sitting there looking at the Alpha Bank allegations with Daniel Jones, and then Daniel Jones, money from his organization is flowing into this effort to create false Twitter bots. And of course, Mikey Dickerson was a contractor for Fusion GPS, in addition to being a prominent, cyber official within the Obama administration. So, we have all these different connections and ties, and that's why I've been a little bit surprised that this hasn't gotten a little bit more coverage. Certainly the Hamilton-68 portion is important, but to put this in context, I mean, it's the same people that are associated with Hamilton-68 are also associated with New Knowledge and essentially Project Birmingham. And I think Margot Cleveland had a really important write-up today where she was kind of digging into different tweets of Matt Taibbi and different things that he's put out. And she noted that anecdote about Roy Moore specifically in the context of Hamilton-68. Well, that is important, but to put that in the broader context, Hamilton-68 was reporting to the Senate that Roy Moore picked up 20,000 Twitter bots at the same time that New Knowledge was the one that created them. So New Knowledge creates 20,000 fake Twitter bots for Roy Moore, and then Hamilton-68 turns around and they tell the U.S. Senate, hey, there's a bunch of Russian influence campaign here, 20,000 accounts behind this Senate guy. And that's the conspiracy, right? That is one portion of a much larger and concerted effort that I think we're talking about here.
And that brings up another key facet to the whole, that's a big part of Russiagate, was this Senate Intelligence Committee was Daniel Jones in there, Mikey Dickerson, Jaffe was somehow mixed up in that. And they produced this report that to this day is still pointed to as, no, it was not, the Russiagate was not false. The Steele dossier had a lot of validity to it. Because they put this, it's the same people that for whatever reason managed to get this Senate committee wrapped around their fingers and put this report out that it's a bane to our existence. Because every time we start talking about something, that people are pointing to this report, which was just complete crap.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've been asking for years is where were all the investigations into Project Birmingham, right? Because we had the New York Times, we had the Washington Post push this out there, and of course we had additional write-ups from NPR and I think a few other organizations, and then you had Roy Moore out there like, this is absolutely garbage. Roy Moore knew this, right? This is 2019, so this is a few months after the Washington Post article, and he knew TDIP, New Knowledge, and these former Senate staffers were all collaborating on this, and he was calling for an investigation. But to my knowledge, and I've asked for a little bit of FOIA help in the state of Alabama because they require residents there to be residents of Alabama to use the FOIA system. I'm looking for the investigation of this. I haven't found it. I haven't found anything at the federal level. I haven't found anything at the state level that I'm aware of. And apparently this just got memory hold. This whole false flag operation, amidst everything else that was going on, nobody thought to dig into this a little bit more. So we could have pulled up the 990s from TDIP and actually shown some of the transfers and everything. But as we said, I'm trying to keep this one a little bit shorter so that we can let MB go tonight. So maybe in a future video, maybe we'll try to do like a broader conspiracy coverage of this, and maybe we can revisit that a little bit. Any other points that we need to hit before we end this one early on a Friday night?
I don't think so. This is such an overlooked, and you've been on this for a long time. It's amazing to me that this isn't a bigger deal. I mean, could you imagine if this was a Republican operation in, California or something that managed to swipe a Senate seat based on creating Russian Twitter bots? And I don't think that necessarily had a huge effect on the campaign at the end of the day, but it was a huge story and it was obviously intended to do harm. And there was malice of forethought to do this. It's just insane that this kind of, there was some tut-tutting in the media when they got caught, but there's no crimes were committed here. How is this not, front and center of anything we talk about? This is something that, like, is right there out in the open, that it's just corruption that can't be denied.
Absolutely. I mean, you'd think this would merit, 10 minutes on TV today, revisiting some of this. I mean, the New York Times covered it, the Washington Post covered it. Where's our broadcast media? Can't they sum this up a little bit? Certainly would be nice to revisit this. I mean, this is right there. I mean, there's no speculation here at all. We have this in documentary form. New York Times investigated, Washington Post investigated it. The counts were falsified. It involves TDIP. It involves, operatives connected to Fusion GPS. Hamilton-68's in the mix. It's all there. And Hamilton-68's telling the Senate that, there's all these Russian bots, and the only ones that they found that are actually legit are ones that were created by New Knowledge. And it's just amazing. And as a final reminder, I'm going to say it again. New Knowledge is the same company. It's the same organization that was delivering the reports on the IRA to the Senate. This is what the Senate relied on, is this report right here. New Knowledge. So pretty amazing. I should mention this. I should definitely mention this. So Renee DiResta, I thought this was hilarious a few months ago, right after Elon Musk had taken over. Renee DiResta was apparently engaged by Twitter to do some type of report on influence or disinformation campaigns. And that was just a few months ago that was wrapped up. And it's incredible that you could see somebody associated with New Knowledge, a company that should be famous for manipulating Twitter and creating, these fake Russian Twitter bots. And that same person is engaged to provide work product to Twitter. And of course, she was engaged by the prior owners, but that's the level of disconnect that's out there right now. And it is a stunning. I can't describe it. I wish I had a better vocabulary because I can't get enough of this.
Yeah, this should have probably stopped the entire Russia psychosis dead in its tracks, that the only actual Russian bots that anyone found were created by Democratic funded entities. I mean, that's immediately, that should have been just, all right, let's stop everything and reconsider everything that we think we know. And that never happened at all. I mean, the opposite. This is like the biggest, at least the biggest proven controversy. And it just whipped by. And it's almost like the bigger the bigger the debacle, the less coverage that it gets in the media. It's pretty amazing. The less discussion.
Yeah. I think it's probably a good idea. I should probably link these in the video description for future viewers. So I'll try to remember to do that. If you have anything else, go ahead and jump in, NBRs. I think we've done a good overall broad coverage of this. So I think I'm content to end this one early tonight.
Yeah, I'm good. That was I think we expressed our anger and disgust at this particular subject.
Yeah. I should go back and revisit this whole article because it's pretty amazing stuff. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at these. Definitely keep this in mind as Matt Taibbi continues to report on Hamilton-68 and the whole Russian Twitter bot fiasco. Keep this in context. I mean, this is really important, especially as it relates to Roy Moore and reporting on what Hamilton-68 was including on Roy Moore. I think it's incredible that they're calling it Russian Twitter bots, and their associates are the one that created them. So pretty amazing. I'm going to go ahead and end this one tonight. I hope everybody has a great weekend. MB and I will be back soon with another video covering another topic. So if you have any ideas, please let us know. Like, share, subscribe if you're on one of our platforms. We'd appreciate it. And I will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
See you.